Hi there, welcome to the latest episode of my 10-minute moan. The topic of this 10-minute moan is what's going to happen with reform in Scotland. What sort of effect they're going to have. Now, they could potentially win no seats but really affect the outcome of the election, and I'll explain why. A lot of people think the only effect they'll have is on the knife-edge seats that the Tories could win by splitting their vote and taking votes from people who would normally vote Tory and indeed give the SNP victories in those handful to 7 seats that people are suggesting. But the effect actually could be worse than that, because people in other areas that a tactical vote would mean they would consider voting possibly Labour or Lib Dem, if they really hate the Tory party but are more right of centre, it gives them an option. And those who would have considered tactical voting for possibly Labour or Lib Dem in other areas to oust the SNP could in fact comfort vote themselves into a reform voter. And I don't mind the Reform Party, I genuinely don't. I wish them well. I hope they make some impact in the Westminster election. But I'm concerned about the impact they might have in Scotland, where it's possible they would win no seats, but end up winning plenty for the SNP. Now, this particular article I'm going to read some of it comes from the Express, and it's looking at it from purely what it could affect the Tory seats that they might win. But the picture's actually bigger than that. And I think there's still enough votes going to come away from SNP that they'll still get less than the 29 seats that John Swinney's targeted them for, and probably the target I've had for some months now, which was between 2025, which would give them half the seats they had at the last election, where they got 48 seats. And that would half their income and half their shop money and half their ministerial levy, and potentially take about £800,000 off their bottom line. But there are a lot of polls that have had them as low as 7 seats, 11 seats, 17 seats, 18 seats, and around about just under 20. Seen a lot of polls suggest that, but that's the sort of result that the reform vote could affect, and it might see them winning into the 20s, where it would have been possible to have them under 20s. So I think it just depends on how much you despise the SNP and want them reduced from power and possibly bankrupted, would affect how you're going to vote on Thursday. And I have no problem at all. I would rather vote against the SNP by voting for a party that I don't really like, rather than waking up on Friday morning to the results and I get another SNP MP. That would bother my conscience. If I voted for somebody like Reform, which in normal circumstances I would have at least considered, but I can't consider it because they ain't going to take the seat that I live in. The SNP hold it, so I will vote Labour to try and oust them. And if I wake up on Friday morning to find out I've got an SNP MP, knowing that I've voted and done my best to oust them, then I'll not be happy, but my conscience will be clear. If that was to happen and I had voted elsewhere, my conscience wouldn't be clear. So it all depends on where your priorities are. And in this election, my priority is simply inflict as much pain in the SNP with a hope of potentially bankrupting them and then having no SNP to worry about. And if then I can consider all the other parties again at future elections, then so be it. But this election, no, I have to tactically vote, because I couldn't have in my conscience waking up Friday morning to an SNP MP if I'd voted other than Labour. Okay, now I hope I wake up and find Labour have ousted them, and I'll deal with that later, right? The other thing is, folks say, I don't like Keir Starmer. Get news for you, Keir Starmer's going to be the Prime Minister, regardless of how you vote. So you voting for Labour or not isn't going to affect that. So get over yourself. That's no problem. And if you hate the SNP and you don't tactically vote and you end up with an SNP MP come Friday, you really can't moan about it, can you? Let's be honest. So the article in the Express today says, by Douglas Dickey, Reform vote to hand the SNP a lifeline in 7 knife-edge seats as Tories issue a grave warning. Analysis of the MRP polling shows Nigel Farage party could pave the way for Nationalists to defeat Douglas Ross and other Tory candidates. Nigel Farage's Reform Party is set to hand the SNP a lifeline in 7 key seats in Thursday's general election, the Scottish Express can reveal. The party is standing in every seat in Scotland. It is currently polling between 7 and 8%, not enough to win any. That could prove crucial in knife-edge constituencies where the Scottish Conservatives are best placed to lock out the Nats, Analysis of 8 Tory target or held seats show the Conservatives consistently leading in just one. But if Reform voters unite behind the Conservatives, the SNP could lose many of the 8 seats or even all of them. Data compiled from 5 MRP polls shows that the SNP trails the Tories in just Dumfriesshire, Clydesdale and Tweeddale. But even then it looks like a tight contest between the incumbent David Mundell and the SNP's Kim Marshall. At the other end of the spectrum, the SNP looks strong in Perth and Kinrossshire, although the most recent study by Focal Data suggests the Tories, Luke Graham, would unseat veteran Nat Pete Wishart if Reform voters got behind him. That's a no-brainer. But do people despise the SNP enough to do it? Well, if you vote for Reform, and that's that constituency, it tells me that you actually hate the Tories more than you hate SNP. And I don't have a problem with people hating the Tories, but my sliding scale of shite, they're far better than the SNP, right? So that's a no-brainer as well. Scottish Tory leader Douglas Ross also faces a nervous few days in Aberdeenshire North and Moray East, with Focal Data suggesting he is neck and neck with the SNP's Seamus Logan. Other polling companies give Mr Ross a slight lead, with only Ipsos favouring the Nats, but Ipsos is the one that get £5 million a year off the Scottish Government to produce marketing data, so I always take theirs with a pinch of salt. But again, very, very close, and even the slightest move further towards Reform by some people right of centre would lose him his seat. Reform candidate Jo Hart is tipped to be one of the best performing in Scotland for the party, but her vote risks letting the Nationalist candidate secure the scalp of high-profile Conservative. Other seats where Reform is on course to do John Swinney a favour are West Aberdeenshire and Kincardine, Gordon and Buchan, Moray West, Nairn and Strathspey, Dumfries and Galloway, and Berwickshire, Roxburgh and Selkirk. So if you know that and you still want to vote Reform and you get an SNP MP, you kind of can't feel sorry for yourself come Friday. It comes as the Tories say the general election presents the best chance yet to make it season finale for the SNP's dream of breaking up the UK. The Nats have put independence on page 1, line 1 of their manifesto. Mr Swinney has also said every seat an SNP wins will be used as a mandate to try and demand independence. Scottish Conservative Party Chairman Craig Hoy said this general election in Scotland is a huge opportunity to beat the SNP, so that is all of the focus can finally be on the things that really matter, such as faster GP appointments and fixing the roads. If voters back the Scottish Conservative in key seats, where we are going to toe-to-toe with the Nationalists, it could be season finale for the SNP's bid for independence. We could finish off any hopes of the SNP have of seeking independence and draw a permanent line under the debate that has divided Scotland for more than a decade. Thursday's vote is the best chance yet to beat the SNP, but we need to make sure we seize it by voting Scottish Conservative in key seats where it will be really tight. Even a few votes for another party such as Reform could help the SNP win. I totally agree with all of that, but you can't just think of the seats that have been mentioned that could possibly be won by Tories. You've got to think of them all. And there's a few seats, there's 10 seats for Conservative that the data suggests you should vote tactically in 10 areas for Tory. There's 6 that you should vote Lib Dem and the rest Labour. But by anybody voting anything other than the tactically voted party, the tactical selected party, could see the SNP be your MP in the morning. And if you're quite happy with that, and you don't want to tactically vote, that is your prerogative, because who am I to tell you where to vote? But what you need to be aware of is if you do vote for anyone other than what's tactically recommended, you wake up an SNP MP, you kind of got to just deal with that for 5 years. I would rather vote with my nose pinched like that for somebody who's got a chance of beating the SNP and them to lose than I could face if I voted somebody else and they still lost. I would drive me insane waking up to an SNP MP if I'd done anything other than tactically vote. And that's not just for the Tory areas, that's right across the board. So Reform, yeah, I quite like the idea of having a Reform party because the Tories need some competition to the right of centre, but this ain't the time for us, not in Scotland. and I wish them well in England. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a thumbs up. If you've not already done so, please consider subscribing and hitting the notifications bell. But most importantly of all, unless you're John Swinney, the SNP, or any of the ever-decreasing number of crackpot supporters, everybody else, have a great day. Cheery bye now.